Summary of the Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. The book starts in India with a prologue written by an anonymous member of the Verinder family. This person is Colonel John Herncastle's cousin and a fellow soldier. The unnamed narrator starts by telling the Moonstone's history, which begins in the old temple of Somnath, where the diamond was set in the head of a statue of the Hindu moon god. When the temple was robbed in the 11th century, the guardians of the stone moved it from Benares to the holy city, where the god Vishnu told them and their children to watch over it until the end of human generations. In the 18th century, a Mughal ruler had the diamond stolen. In 1799, the evil Herncastle stole it from Seringapatam, killing a man who said, "The moonstone will have its vengeance yet on you and yours." In 1848, the long first part of the book takes place at the home of Lady Julia Verinder and her rich family in Yorkshire. It is told by Gabriel Betteredge, the Verinders' butler. He starts with a quote from his favorite book, Robinson Crusoe, and then says that Mr. Bruff, the family lawyer, and Mr. Franklin Blake, Rachel Verinder's cousin, are writing up a record of how the diamond was stolen. After a few sidetracks, he tells the story of universal genius Franklin Blake's return to England at age 25, after living and going to school in Europe for more than a decade because his strange father sent him there. On the same day that Franklin arrives, 3 Indian men who look like visiting artists come to the Verinder estate. They are probably looking for a place to stay, and Betteredge's daughter Penelope plans to give them one. Betteredge then tries to comfort the sad ex-convict maid Rosanna Spearman at the Shivering Sand, an area of dangerous quicksand near the Verinders' house. But Franklin Blake shows up out of the blue, and Rosanna leaves. Franklin tells Betteredge a secret at the Shivering Sand. He has the Moonstone, which Colonel Herncastle left to Rachel Verinder as a gift for her 18th birthday. Franklin says that the diamond is cursed or at least part of a plot. He says that Herncastle spent the rest of his solitary, vicious, underground life away from his family, getting death threats, and being afraid that he would be killed because of the diamond. Herncastle may have given Rachel the diamond as a sign of peace and friendship, but he may also have wanted to get back at them by giving them a curse. Franklin has seen a suspicious-looking Indian man follow him to the bank whenever he needs to talk about the Moonstone. He thinks this man might have something to do with the 3 jugglers who have suddenly appeared in Yorkshire. But the bank is still the best place for the diamond, so Franklin leaves it there for a month until Rachel's birthday. During this month, the Indians leave and Rachel and Franklin get very close. They spend hours painting her bedroom door together, which makes people wonder if they are going to get married. But Franklin has competition. Rachel's cousin Godfrey Abel White, who is rich, beautiful, and kind, will come to her birthday party and is clearly after her hand. On Rachel's birthday, Franklin gives her the diamond. When Lady Julia finds out that it came from her brother, she is very upset. At dinner, 24 guests join the family, including the strange and socially inept Dr. Mr. Candy, who argues with Franklin about the value of his job, and the mysterious Anglo-Indian traveler Mr. Mirthwaite, who scares away the 3 Indians when they return to the house that night and tells Franklin and Betteredge that the diamond puts its owner in serious danger. The next morning, the diamond was gone from Rachel's cabinet, even though the Indians couldn't have gotten into the house. Superintendent Seagrave, a police officer in the area, comes to the scene and says that the thief is someone in the house. He rudely questions everyone, which makes Rachel angry, and goes through the maid's things. Sergeant Cuff, a famous London detective, arrives soon, fires Seagrave, and starts a more careful investigation. He knows right away that a paint smear on Rachel's door will lead to the killer's identity, since it must have happened late the night before, when the diamond went missing. Rachel is the only one who, for some reason, won't let Cuff look through her things. Even though she is starting to like Franklin Blake, she gets very angry with him and won't talk to him until he leaves. Rosanna, who seems to also like Franklin, starts acting strangely, which makes everyone suspicious. Cuff looks into Rosanna and finds out that she recently got a new nightgown, probably because Rachel's door painted it, and was planning to quit her job. But when Rachel chooses to leave home for a while, Cuff figures out that the diamond was never taken and that Rachel still has it. On the same day, Cuff finds out that Rosanna jumped into the water at the shivering sand and killed herself. He tells Lady Julia that he thinks Rosanna and Rachel were working together, and he makes a detailed plan to show that they were. Instead, Julia decides to tell Rachel that Rosanna has died. Rachel says that she has never talked to Rosanna one-on-one. Julia takes her to London and fires Cuff, who leaves after saying that Better Edge will soon hear from the three Indians, a London gem dealer named Septimus Lucre, and Rosanna's friends, the Yolland family. Amazingly, all three come true. Limping Lucy, the Yolland's daughter, leaves a letter for Franklin Blake, who has already left for Europe, and the newspaper says that 3 strolling Indians have been bothering Mr. Lucre in London. This is the end of Betteridge's story and the first part of the book. The second person to tell the story is Julia's distant niece, the false Christian fanatic Miss Clack. As soon as Julia and Rachel get to London, Clack starts hanging out with them because she wants to turn them to her moralistic religious beliefs. She wants to hear their talk, and she needs money badly. She then says that the 3 Indians attacked, restrained, and searched not only Mr. Septimus Lucre, who apparently put the moonstone in his bank to keep it safe, but also Clack's beloved Godfrey Abel White, whom she calls a Christian hero and who works with her on committees for women's charities. This makes people think that Godfrey might have had something to do with the theft, but when he tells Rachel, whom Clack thinks is not fair or ladylike, she signs a paper saying that he is not guilty. Julia tells Miss Clack in secret that she is dying and asks her to be a witness when she signs her will. Miss Clack is happy about Julia's approaching death because it gives her a chance to save her soul by converting her to Christianity in her last days. Clack starts right away by giving Julia a bunch of religious pamphlets, which she turns down. He then hides them around her house in a clever way. Clack hides behind the curtains when she finds out that Godfrey is coming to visit but doesn't want to talk to her. She is shocked to see Godfrey propose marriage to Rachel and then convince her to say yes. Julia dies downstairs just a few minutes later, but Clack chooses not to go to her funeral. Rachel and the Abel Whites move to Brighton, and Clack decides to save Rachel's soul instead. One day, Rachel's lawyer, Mr. Bruff, comes to see her and talk to her. The next day, Rachel says, "I will never marry Mr. Godfrey Abel White." She tells Godfrey, and he agrees to call off the wedding, but his parents don't agree. Mr. Abel White yells angrily at Rachel and then at Miss Clack when she tries to help with some Christian pamphlets. Clack desperately offers to be Rachel's new guardian, but Rachel says no right away. Clack ends her story with "They all laughed at her, left her alone, and she never saw Rachel Verinder again." The next person to tell the story is Mr. Bruff, a lawyer. He starts by explaining why Rachel and Godfrey really broke up. Godfrey only wanted Rachel's money, which Julia's will said he couldn't have. Second, Bruff says that one of the Indians came to his office to ask for a loan. The same thing happened to Septimus Lucre, but Bruff says that the Indian was much more polite and professional than Lucre. After talking with a daring colonist named Mr. Murthwaite, Bruff learns that the Indian man really wanted to know what a usual loan repayment term would be so that he could figure out when Lucre will have to take the moonstone out of the bank. In late June of the next year, 1849, Murthwaite is sure that the Indians will try to steal it. Franklin Blake, who edited all of the stories, takes over the story when his father died in 1849 and he went back to England. When he gets there, he remembers his past with Rachel and decides to win her back, or at least find out why she turned against him so quickly after the moonstone was stolen and hasn't talked to him since. He goes to Yorkshire and gets the letter Rosanna left with Limping Lucy. In it, she tells him to pull up a chain at the shivering sand. At the end of this chain, he finds a tin case with a letter and a paint-stained nightgown in it. But it's not Rosanna's dress, it's his. Franklin starts to drink as he and Better Edge read Rosanna's letter, which makes him even more surprised. She tells him she loves him and says that she hid his dirty nightgown and made him a new one to keep him from being found out. Franklin feels bad that he unintentionally made Rosanna kill herself, but he still doesn't know how he could have stolen the diamond since he wasn't drunk and doesn't sleepwalk. But this helps explain why Rachel treated him so badly after the theft. When he went to see her, she told him, "I saw you take the diamond with my own eyes." She is still very angry at him, but it's clear that she still loves him. After their meeting, Franklin goes back to Yorkshire, where he meets the old family doctor, Mr. Candy, who got sick on Rachel's birthday and hasn't gotten better since. Candy says he has something to tell Franklin, but can't remember what it is because he can't keep his thoughts together. Candy's assistant, Ezra Jennings, a hideous and terminally ill but sincere and ambitious doctor, has been able to piece together Candy's scattered thoughts and found out that on the night of Rachel's birthday, Candy put laudanum, opium, in Franklin's drink after dinner as a joke. They had been arguing about the value of medicine, and Franklin had been having trouble sleeping since he quit smoking. Jennings, who is hooked to the drug laudanum, thinks that Franklin could have taken the diamond while high on the drug and not remembered it the next day. He suggests a bold experiment. They will reenact everything that happened the year before, from Franklin giving up smoking to setting the house up exactly as it was on the night of the theft, and then give Franklin laudanum again to see what happens. Franklin agrees, and he and Ezra Jennings start getting ready for the experiment. In his diary, Ezra Jennings describes the experiment in depth. In the next part of the story, Ezra Jennings's journal describes how he got ready for his experiment with Franklin Blake. Most importantly, he asks Gabriel Betteredge and Mr. Bruff to be witnesses to the experiment, even though they don't believe in Jennings's science. Rachel also wants to be there because she hopes the experiment will clear Franklin, and her new guardian, the dramatic Mrs. Meridew, wants to go with her as a chaperone. On the night of the experiment, Jennings gives Franklin the laudanum and talks to him about the diamond. That night, Franklin wakes up in a daze, goes to Rachel's room, grabs the experiment's fake diamond, and falls asleep in Rachel's sitting room. The experiment works and doesn't work at the same time. It shows that Franklin stole the diamond in the beginning, even though he didn't mean to. But it doesn't show where the diamond might be now. At the end of his book, Jennings is sad about his friendless and lonely life, but he is happy to have helped Franklin and Rachel get back together. Franklin Blake takes over the story again in the next part. He goes to London to look for the diamond with Mr. Bruff, Bruff's young helper Gooseberry, and Sergeant Cuff. They watch Mr. Luker take the moonstone out of the bank and then follow different suspects for the rest of the day. It turns out that Gooseberry picked the right one, a strange man dressed like a sailor whom the others thought was a spy for the Indians but was actually the man with the diamond. The group of detectives goes to the pub where Gooseberry saw the sailor check in and another man follow him. The sailor hasn't been seen or heard from for sure, and then his body is found in his room, where the Indians seem to have taken the moonstone. Cuff sees, though, that the sailor is wearing a mask. He pulls it off and shows Godfrey Abel White, the man he had come to think did the crime. At the end of the book, there are a few short stories. In the first, Cuff shows proof that the Indians killed Godfrey Abel White and left England with the diamond. He then explains why Godfrey stole the diamond in the first place. Despite his public image as a morally upstanding philanthropist, Godfrey had a mistress and a villa outside of London, and he spent £20,000 from a trust that wasn't his and that he needed to replace right away. He could either take something from Rachel's fortune, or he could sell the moonstone. In the next short story, Mr. Candy writes in a letter about how Ezra Jennings died and was buried in an unknown place. Gabriel Betteredge writes the last story. He hails Robinson Crusoe once more before telling the reader that Franklin has married Rachel and that Rachel is now pregnant. In 3 short stories, the novel's epilogue shows how the Indians brought the moonstone back to their country and stayed ahead of the British officials who tried to stop them. The last of these stories comes from a tourist named Mr. Mirthwaite, who gets caught up in a mass journey to the Temple of Somnath. There, he sees the 3 Indians he had last seen in Britain reveal the figure of the moon god, which has been returned to its rightful glory with the moonstone in its forehead.
About the author. Wilkie Collins grew up comfortably in London, Italy, and France. His father was a well-known painter, so everyone thought he would either follow in his father's path or become a priest. Even though he tried his hand at his father's job and later went to law school, he became more interested in writing when he was in his late teens and did office work. In 1951, he met and became friends with Charles Dickens. Later, Dickens published nearly all of Collins's novels, including The Moonstone, in serial form in his weekly magazine all the year round. This was a regular way to print books in Victorian England. Collins and Dickens worked together on stories and plays during the 1850s. They also played in a number of well-known plays together. During this time, Collins also started releasing stories, trip stories, essays, and criticism in addition to his first 4 books. His last book, Hide and Seek, which came out in 1854, was well received, but his story The Woman in White, which came out in 1860 and is still his best-known work along with The Moonstone, 1868, was much better. These books solidified his reputation for making stories that are hard to figure out. They are also considered basic texts in the Victorian tradition of sensation novels, which are meant to make the reader feel something, like modern-day thrillers or telenovelas. From the 1870s on, Collins's work focused more and more on social problems like class differences and the wrongdoings of the British aristocracy. For example, his book Man and Wife, 1870, was written to show how silly the marriage and inheritance rules were in Scotland and Ireland. In fact, he was known for not liking marriage and traditional organized faith, so he made his own, more open versions of both. He spent most of his life with his partner Caroline Graves, but they didn't get married. In 1868, he started a new family with Martha Rudd. He also said he was religious, but he avoided and made fun of British Christianity his whole life, even through the character of Miss Clack in The Moonstone. In 1873 and 1874, Collins did a well-known tour of the United States, but most scholars and reviewers say that his work got worse after that. This decline is probably due to the fact that Collins's gout, a painful joint disease, got worse over the course of his life. As a result, he became hooked to the painkiller laudanum, opium, which also plays an important role in the story of The Moonstone. His health got worse over time, and he died of a stroke in 1882.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.